Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Monday Night Travel with Rick Steves Europe. My name is Lisa Friend, and I'm delighted to be your host this evening as we explore the cathedrals of our national pastime, the American ballpark. Our guest tonight is a lifelong baseball fan, published author, travel expert, and road tripper extraordinaire. Please join me in welcoming our guest for the evening, Travis Parker. Travis, welcome to Monday Night Travel.
Thanks, Lisa. I've tuned in for many of these, and now I'm happy to be on the presenting side, and it's as always great to hang out with you this evening.
Well, I enjoy hanging out with you too, but I want you to know that I am not joking for the audience when I say you're a travel expert because you leveraged several years of working for the European Union, and now you're contributing to this incredibly important corner of our website, the Rick Steves website, the Travel Updates and Insights blog. Can you tell us a little
Yes.
more about that?
Subtle plug for some of the work that I've been doing. Yes, so on the Rick Steves website, we have a blog that covers big developments in Europe. Things like major site closures or big travel trends, the United Kingdom launching the ETA that you need to get if you're going to go and visit London, things like that that you need to know, and then actually covering a handful of topics that we think you don't need to know, but you might be hearing a lot about in today's sensationalized news media. And we call it the Rick Steves Travel Updates and Insights blog. And I, along with a lot of our content team, make sure that we cover pretty much all the big developments in a timely fashion and that typical kind of straight from the rucksack Rick Steves writing mentality. So, yeah, after working for the European Union for 6.5 years running cultural programs, it's good to be back with Rick Steves Europe.
Well, we're happy to have you back. So, tonight, what makes one a baseball and baseball park aficionado?
So I am going to dive into the baseball park aficionado momentarily. I will start with baseball. Baseball, to be a baseball aficionado, you just need to be a fan. There is no, upper label or higher echelon to achieve. There are, of course, kind of hierarchical rankings when it comes to baseball historians or official statisticians, but anybody who's a fan of baseball can be a baseball aficionado. You can memorize statistics, you can memorize players, you can just fall in love with a team because you like a player, because you like maybe the entire team, maybe because you like a food that's served at the ballpark, or maybe because you like the ballpark itself. But me, I consider myself a ballpark aficionado, which is a very niche label, the one that I want to take you through this evening. So, Lisa, if you're all right with it, I'm going to share my screen and start launching into my love for America's baseball stadiums.
Thank you.
All right, you should now see a blue screen up here called the ballpark. So, as I mentioned, over the past 15 years, in the margins of guiding and writing for Rick Steves Europe, I developed a very odd side expertise. It's one that's rooted in travel and sightseeing, but it's also one that blends another one of my loves, baseball, more specifically, baseball's sites, which I affectionately call ballparks. Almost accidentally, I became a ballpark guru, or would I prefer, a ballpark aficionado. Somebody who loves and weirdly knows a lot about Major League Baseball stadiums. Specifically, my focus is Major League Baseball stadiums, emphasis on the Major League. There are 30 active baseball stadiums today. There are hundreds of other baseball stadiums in the United States alone, whether they be independent ball or around the world for international ball, different leagues over in Korea, Japan, et cetera, et cetera. My focus are the 30 MLB parks. Maybe one day I'll expand, but there's enough to keep up on today's 30 Major League Baseball stadiums as it is. I've given lectures on Major League Baseball stadiums, similar to this evening, although I will say most of my lectures don't normally start with me inviting you to crack a beer, because we are talking about ballparks. And what do you do when you go to the ballpark? You normally get, I don't have a hot dog on me, but I do have a beer on me. So, Lisa, this one's for you. I'm going to be pouring and sipping this beer as I take you and everybody on this call through this wonderful evening of baseball stadiums, traveling, road tripping through America's ballparks. There you go. Cheers, everybody, and thank you for joining me. So as I mentioned, though, my lectures are normally a little bit more formalized. Sometimes they turn into, cheers, Lisa, I see you drinking there. Um,
Cheers.
normally they turn normally they turn into some question and answer, just general kind of Nice discussion about what it's like to visit different ballparks, what you will see at each one if you are kind of a fan of baseball stadiums or travel. But a lot of this work has also turned into a couple of other products that you see on your screen right now. The first on the left is a podcast that I've hosted called Ballpark Banter, which is a 30-part series that unpacks the history of each MLB stadium. One episode dedicated per ballpark. You can tune in. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. Tells you what it's like to catch a game at each and gives you the history of each stadium and kind of some fun facts about them as well. And then I've also, as you mentioned, Lisa, written a book about what it's like to visit all 30 ballparks, which I'm going to be talking about in detail here in just a second. And then actually all this is kind of gathered together to, I'm proud to say, I've got a deal for a second book about ballparks. So clearly there is some demand out there for baseball stadiums, and people who are interested in seeing multiple, if not seeing them all. Sounds a bit wonky and niche, as I said, and it is. But in exploring this passion, I've discovered a few things about why ballparks are interesting. The first is baseball stadiums have become tourist sites, and I do mean this. They possess a cultural appeal that goes beyond other sporting venues of the Big Five American sports leagues. Some of this is thanks to baseball being seen, in colloquial terms, as our national pastime. And therefore, the places where the national pastime is played has a spot in our hearts. Baseball is rooted in the heart of America. It's vintage Americana, as one of my best friends likes to call it. And it also helps that some of the parks that baseball is played at are very, very old or filled with tradition and are therefore appealing for people, even if they don't like baseball, to go and visit. A lot like historic sites that we like to go and see in Europe. But second, baseball stadiums are getting into kind of a more detailed level. They're unique because they have very few dimensional requirements. In baseball, it's 90 feet to each base and 60 feet 6 inches from the mound to the plate. And that's pretty much it. Every field is unique, which means the stadium that's built around it is also very unique. I like to compare this to like an NBA arena. I love basketball, but NBA arenas don't possess the same interest as baseball stadiums. Quite frankly, because NBA arenas are required to surround a playing surface, a basketball court, that has to be the exact same in every NBA arena. 10 feet to the free throw line, 10 feet to the hoop, 98 feet, I think, from baseline to baseline, no exceptions. Therefore, it's hard for an NBA arena or a hockey rink, or to an extent, even an American football stadium, to get fun with the field or with the stadium that they've built if they can't surround something that's already unique. It's kind of hard. They all wind up, if you plop yourself into an NBA arena and then plop yourself into another, you'd be like, they kind of look the same. But in baseball stadiums, almost anything goes. Beyond the diamond, beyond the 90 feet and 60 feet 6 inches, there's really no restrictions. So that's how you wind up getting huge walls in Fenway Park, or short walls in New York, ivy-covered walls in Wrigley Field. It also means that one game that's played in one stadium is actually different than a game that's played in another. Like a home run hit to Yankee Stadium, where the wall is very short in right field, is actually going to be caught by the right fielder if that same ball is hit in Detroit. And I think that this actually makes visiting ballparks, beyond just what they look like and their atmosphere, also very interesting, because the game that you see there is going to be completely unique. And then third, probably because of what I just discussed, I've learned through my 15 years of ballpark love, ballparkness, that I'm not the only one who has this passion. Nearly everybody who I speak to, and the folks tuning in tonight, probably at least have some thread of interest in baseball or baseball stadiums. And if you do, then you yearn to learn more about them. And heck, even some folks I talk to are interested in ballparks, and they're not actually interested in baseball, because ballparks have this, as I said, kind of appeal to almost like a tourist site, something that goes beyond even the sports that's played there. And this communal love for ballparks has really propelled my work in this area. But before talking ballparks with you all, and trust me, at the end of this, you will be like, oh, I think I have a decent take on what's going on with baseball stadiums these days. At least I hope you do. That way I will have done well. I do want to start by talking about how I got hooked on all this and where the spark for my kind of ballpark side hustle and love started. Back in 2011, my best friends and I did something that was both crazy and beautiful. The summer after graduating high school, we pooled all of our money together and we bought a rickety old Volkswagen hippie bus and we drove it around the country to see a game in all 30 ballparks. This is a map from that journey. As you'll notice, some of the stadiums have different names than they do today. That's because you can see the date down in the corner. It's from 2011, which is when we did that. Um, the inspiration for this trip, that's me in the second to the right there, next to my friend Jack in the Twins sweater, Kellen to my right on the left, and then Kendall on the far left. These are the four guys that went around the country in our baseball trip. We were actually joined by a fifth who you'll see in just a second as well. The inspiration for this trip began because the four of us grew up as Seattle Mariners fans. I'm from Seattle, Washington originally, and living in the Pacific Northwest, you are extremely isolated from any other ballparks. I've since lived in the Midwest and the East Coast, where seeing games in other stadiums is actually quite easy. But for a Seattleite, the next closest ballpark is in the Bay Area, which is a 15-hour drive away. So, as I mentioned, the four of us, five at one point, that's Ruben on the right there, who joined for a good chunk of the journey as well. We set out to try to see the Mariners play in a couple different stadiums, and then that all just started snowballing. And before we knew it, we were plotting ridiculous schedules to hit all 30 in one summer before we each left for college. 56 days our trip was, 14,600 miles, four 18-year-olds packed into a Volkswagen hippie bus. I mean, think about that. It is kind of insanity. It's very original. I like to think Rick Steves' style of travel, might I say, just roughing it a little bit, a little gross. We spent some nights at the house of friends and family along the way, but most of the time we were sleeping, four of us in that van. And there was no air conditioning. And trust me, some of the places we were in the middle of summer were hot. We would sleep two up top, where the pop top of the van was, and two down below, where the bench seat would fold out. This photo that you see here is a good example of what the car looked like always. We would drive through the night, meaning we'd take shifts. We always had two people awake in the front, and then two people would sleep in the back as the car rumbled down the interstate. So this is me on the left and my friend Kendall sleeping as we drove cross state lines somewhere. And that is pretty much a snapshot of what that disgusting vehicle looked like for the majority of our trip. As I said, it was crazy and it was also beautiful. What was interesting, though, was before departing, our plan actually got picked up by the local Mariners affiliate, Root Sports, who interviewed us. And this interview sparked a few local organizations to actually be interested in sponsoring the trip. So we partnered with an organization called the Edgar Martinez Foundation, which was a local charity run by the Seattle Mariners legend, and opted to raise funds along our journey, pledging to donate anything we didn't spend on tickets, gas, and food to the foundation. In the end, we're super proud to say that we raised $10,000 for the Edgar Martinez Foundation, which was a lot for an 18-year-old. I'm still proud of that. But one result of that was one business that chipped in offered to do so by, quote, wrapping the van. We didn't know what that meant. So we said, sure. And the car that we bought, which was originally red, wound up, well, turning into a kaleidoscopic piece of art driving down the freeway. You could not miss us, man. We baseball graphics, the Seattle skyline. There was a poorly pixelated infield. Everyone rolling down the road next to us would honestly slow down. They'd see that first, they'd be like, "What on earth is this?" And then they'd read the lettering and realize, "Oh my gosh, these kids are driving around the country to see all these baseball stadiums. I want to talk to them." So many people would come up to us in parking lots, even like roll their windows down on the side of the road and say, "Hey, like I want to chat." Like this man who we met in Toronto noticed us in a parking lot and said that they actually had the same desire. And the next thing I know, everybody who would notice us would come up and want to chat ballparks. They'd want to talk about the stadiums they'd already seen, or maybe the ones they wanted to get to, and share which were their favorites, and in general, well, their love for baseball.
Oh, I just love that so much. And I'm just trying to not say anything untoward because you're such a little baby face in that shirt.
Look at that. Did you see some of the shorts that we were wearing in some of those photos? They go down to my ankles, for God's sake.
I'm sure that was the style then. So, but I want our viewers to know that your love for baseball has not gone away. It didn't end with this trip. If I remember correctly, Baseball even had a part in your wedding. Is that true? Your wife actually created somehow?
Yeah, that's good observation by you. I I did. Oh my goodness, do you have what I think you have here? So I married a lady from Philadelphia. Yes, you do. Lisa. Well done. I married a lady from Philadelphia. That's my wife, Reagan, there, in the white dress, obviously. And she and her family are huge Phillies fans. And so I, being a Seattle Mariners, just baseball in general fan, was very into this. And we would hang out a lot, kind of in the early days of our relationship. And then meeting her family, watched a lot of baseball, and we became huge collective Phillies fans. And if you know much about the Phillies, you know who the Philly fanatic is, which is that big green alien monster. It's actually a flightless bird, technically speaking, in front of us or in between us there. And we got married in downtown Philadelphia, and we had the Philly fanatic come to our wedding. The fanatic caused all sorts of havoc. He tried to cut our cake. He spilled a few drinks. We had to assign bodyguards to the fanatic, and it was lovely. But yes, baseball has continued to follow me even to parts where I did not think that it would, such as a big green alien bird showing up at my wedding.
Well, I was happy to learn about that because I had seen that mascot around and I had no idea what it was. So I'm glad to know that it is a flightless bird.
A flightless bird from the Galapagos, and it prides itself in being the most sued mascot in the history of sports. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Okay. When you and the ballpark boys got back to Seattle, you found out that people had heard about your exploits far and wide, and there was local interest, including an invitation from a well-known travel personality.
Yeah, cue my transition to Rick Steves Europe. When we returned, we actually did pick up some interest. We gave a few interviews. Actually, we gave a few interviews along the way. A handful of like local affiliates. We had a website and stuff that we were, hosting a pledge drive on, and we get interviewed by radio shows or at ballparks by local newspapers because it was a fun thing, and people liked the story. And one person who picked up on it was Rick Steves. So when we returned, me and Kellen, who's another one of the ballpark boys, as we sheepishly called ourselves back in 2011, we came up to Edmonds, Washington, to the Rick Steves headquarters, sat down with Rick for an hour, and had a radio interview. I think you can still find it somewhere in the archives on the Rick Steves Europe radio show. And it was outstanding. It was fun to talk about travel and actually like the ways that you can incorporate the characteristics of good travel, not just into European travel, but into road tripping across the country and even into sports tourism, which is a growing field that sometimes I cross paths into. And of course, chatting with somebody like Rick Steves about baseball stadiums was fun because for once I actually knew more about the topic than Rick Steves did. So that's the only time that I will have the ability to say that I knew a little bit more about baseball stadiums than the travel authority himself. So it was very fun. And one of the things that actually kind of that radio interview and that interest from folks like Rick Steves taught me was, whoa, there's a lot of interest in this, and maybe more interest even than I realized, and interest that could keep going, kind of keep this momentum going. So when I returned, outside of having a handful of interviews to talk about how this journey went, I leaned into this interest. I wrote a memoir, which is on the left. It's called Touch 'Em All, short stories and observations about America and its pastime. It's part ballpark handbook, part coming of age story. You can order it online or at your local bookstore. I'd, of course, love it if you did. It makes a great Father's Day or birthday gift. I realize we're a few days after Father's Day, so I'm a little bit late on that. Maybe for next year or something like that. And it was a very fun process to write that book. It actually took 6 years for me to write, in cahoots with my friends, to make sure we had most of the details correct. And then that there was actually a narrative arc, which if you read it, you will actually find. It's not just, this is what this ballpark is like. This is what this ballpark is like. It's truly a retelling of our tale. And trust me, there were some ups and there were some downs when you drive 14,600 miles with a bunch of teenagers across the country. And then, as I already mentioned as well, we also launched a 30 episode podcast series, which we've actually reproduced last year. So it's fairly updated, where each ballpark gets its own episode. Ballpark Banter, you can find it wherever you get your podcast. And as I mentioned earlier as well, both of these, like the general interest from returning from our trip, really kind of took off and resulted in a demand for more content, which helped me land a second book deal, which explores the evolution, or my upcoming book will explore the evolution of the ballpark as a concept. And it's that subject matter that I kind of want to spend the rest of this Monday Night Travel talking about. So I will be touching on a handful of different baseball stadiums throughout this, but really leading you through this question that I'm asking in this book that I'm writing, which is coming out in 2027. So we still have to wait. The publication process takes a while. And the central question is, how did the ballpark evolve? This book explores the evolution of the ballpark by looking at the ballpark, capital T, capital B, as a single entity, not as many individual structures, but one structure with many variations. At large, how did the game of baseball go from playing in glorified cow pastures in New York to whatever modernist structure they're probably about to build in Las Vegas, with stops at places like Wrigley Field and the Astrodome along the way? I'm doing this by dedicating each chapter to examining a specific element that's now commonplace at the baseball stadium, looking at its purpose, its evolutionary history, and so on. So chapters cover things like the history of the bleachers, the history of the hot dog, why we sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," fireworks after a home run, so on and so forth. I like to kind of equate it to, maybe you know that book, A History of the World in 100 Objects. It's like that, but baseball stadium. You'll have to read the book to get the details on that and things like how the warning track evolved because old Yankee Stadium also hosted track and field competitions, or that it's called the bullpen because they actually used to wrangle late arriving fans there. But right now, I want to, as I mentioned, walk you through a quick 101 on the history and evolution of the ballpark. We start in the era that I call grounds and fields. This is the mid 1800s. Baseball was not, as is popular myth, created, discovered, written down by Abner Doubleday in a field in Cooperstown, New York. That's why the Hall of Fame is there. The game of baseball actually has a variety of origins. Primarily, baseball evolved as a pseudo variation of cricket in the mid 1800s, thanks to European immigrants playing their sport to moving to places like New York City. Americanization of the game, of course, occurred. I always like to say across the Atlantic, somewhere the bat became round, the ball suddenly couldn't bounce as it was pitched, and we started wearing gloves and hats. But a key part about this game was that, like cricket, it was played in an open field, like you see on your screen right now. Unlike other popular sports of the 19th century, think boxing, tennis, horse racing, baseball was played without dimensions. It was played in the field, in pastures and wide open lawns. One of the earliest spots that we have good records of baseball games being played, being recorded, is the Elysian Fields in Hoboken, New Jersey, just across the river from New York City. It was here where a group of ball players, led famously by a man named Alexander Cartwright, although there were a lot of pioneering figures in this group, actually started writing rules to this game down. So it had been being played for a while in different variations. There were different names too, but Cartwright and his group started writing rules down, and a lot of people look to the Elysian Fields as kind of the birthplace of baseball. These rules were known as the Knickerbocker rules. The Alexander Cartwright's team was the Knickerbockers. They were the original New York Knicks, if you will. And they asserted things like no peg outs. Couldn't hit somebody with a ball and then they were out. 9 men aside instead of like 12 or 13 or whatever your local softball team wants to do. And crucial to my book and crucial to the ballpark, bases had to be aligned in a diamond. And the ball had to be hit between the first and the third base to be fielded. So truly, the core element of the ballpark, of the baseball stadium, is just that. You just need to have a diamond in the field. And that's kind of it. And I think a lot of people find this quite funny, but think about it this way. The Knickerbocker rules established foul territory. The rest of the rules are pretty much about gameplay. The only one that addresses the field is a diamond in the field, and then you can play baseball on it. And that's still prominent in ballparks today. To be considered a baseball field, all you need to do is have an open field and a diamond somewhere in it. So I always like to kind of use this analogy. Think about your local neighborhood baseball field, not the Major League Baseball stadium, like the T-ball field, or the one that's in a huge park in the neighborhood, or maybe out in the countryside where There's maybe no fences. There's, like in this photo, just a dirt semicircle in the corner with one of those weird chain link dome things surrounding home plate. You know that this is a baseball field just by looking at it, because the identifying trait is the only thing that fields need. Even base length varies. 60 feet for T-ball, 45 feet for 60 feet for Little League, 45 feet for T-ball, 90 feet, of course, for the majors. But they all need to have a diamond. And a diamond in the field is kind of the 1-1 rule of being a baseball stadium. And this that you see on your screen is pretty similar to the one I showed earlier of the Elysian Field. This is what the earliest version of the ballpark looked like, and it stayed that way for about 3 decades until we hit the 1860s, 1870s in an era that I call the wooden park era. This is when things really, really began to change. It primarily started in Brooklyn when an innovative business owner named William Camier took advantage of rising interest in this bat and ball sport and opted to build a pristine field that was surrounded by fences and seats so that he could host top-tier games and, most importantly, charge admission. His park was called the Union Grounds. The one on your screen right now is the Polo Grounds in Washington, D.C. That photo is from 1879, and I love it because you can see the Capitol in the background, but it gives a good idea of what the Union Grounds looked like without, I think to nobody's surprise, there's no good remaining photos of the Union Grounds. But this one here, this is the South End Grounds in Boston. This gives a really good idea. This is an artist rendering of the South End Grounds in Boston of what the Union Grounds was about and what these wooden parks of the late 1800s were about. Secluding baseball inside of fenced areas so that people who wanted to see the games would pay to do so. Spotting the success of the Union Grounds, new similar enclosed parks began to pop up and down the East Coast, and then into the Midwest, and then onto the West Coast as the popularity and business success of baseball began to spread. These fields were built quickly, and they were made primarily with wood and plopped wherever there was land in a city, meaning they had ridiculous dimensions. This field that you see here, it's not a perfect rendering, but it gives an idea of what the South End Grounds were like. It was 250 feet to right field. You can kind of see that down the line there, but it was 450 feet to deep left center, which you can't even see in the drawing there. Now that's a shot, but it's nothing compared to Boston's other wooden park of the late 1800s, the Huntington Avenue Grounds, where it took a 635-foot home run to clear the fence. For reference, the farthest distance in today's ballparks is Detroit's Comerica Park, which is 420 feet to dead center, and the shortest is 302 feet to right at Fenway Park. But a big equalizer for these parks soon came in the form of natural disaster. As mentioned, nearly all these parks were made of wood, and many of them burned. Puffed and burned down the ballpark. Those that didn't burn were often rebuilt out of fear of fire. And there was even one baseball stadium in Kansas City that sunk. Yep, they built it on like an old swamp and then just realized it was going horribly. And after a few years, just surrendered it to the elements, and it wound up essentially disintegrating into the ground. So as all this was happening, steel and brick was also becoming more and more popular as the choice material for large structures in the United States, like sports stadiums. So these recently burned down venues started to become replaced by the more sustainable brick and steel ones. The first ballpark that leaned into this is an often forgotten ballpark, and it's the one that you see there in this grainy image on your screen. This is Philadelphia's Baker Bowl. It was built in the late 1800s after its predecessor, Recreation Park, burned. The Baker Bowl not only used brick and steel, but it also incorporated a cantilevered second deck, which you can see there, which allowed more and more fans to sit closer to the action and be a little bit safer and supported on the second story. Lined with brick, the Baker Bowl was objectively attractive, and it blended into downtown Philadelphia well. It also sparked a new round of stadiums that, too, were fit into the city and built with brick, steel, and cantilevered decks to be more durable and accompany more fans. We call these jewel box parks. The next round, the jewel box parks are kind of nostalgically seen as the golden era of baseball stadiums. They are pretty. I don't think there's another word to use it. They're objectively beautiful structures. They use brick and steel in these kind of clever ways, dark green banisters that kind of arc over the seats. They're almost romantic in their own way. And since they were seen as pretty And since they earned themselves this nickname of the Jewel Box. Think of Wrigley Field, think Fenway Park. This is old Yankee Stadium here, Tiger Stadium, Ebbets Field, all the golden age parks, that old timers love to talk about. These featured, as I mentioned, second decks, and Yankee Stadium was the first to have a third deck that you see here, and other kind of weird attributes too, like flagpoles inside the ballpark or little hills in center field to actually help level them with the street, all sorts of unique, funky things. And unlike their wooden predecessors, they were built to last, and well, last they did. A big part of the nostalgic intrigue of the Jewel Box era is, of course, that baseball games are still being played in a few of them. The oldest active park in the United States is Wrigley Field, which is a minor league stadium in Birmingham, Alabama. But most people normally look toward Fenway Park and Wrigley Field as kind of the OG ballparks, if you will. They're both over 110 years old. And if you catch a game at either of these stadiums, you'll get the tingly feeling that I spoke about earlier, where you realize, oh man, there is a cultural appeal to this. This is old. This is rooted in America. This is a tourist site. This is a historic spot. And it's something that I love to kind of tap into, because I think a lot of people will go to Fenway or to Wrigley and think, oh man, why do I like this place so much? Is it just because it's old? Well, yeah, it's because it's old, but it's also because it's seen over 100 years of the national pastime played there. You're sitting in the same seat that, hundreds and hundreds of thousands, millions and millions of people before you have also watched this beautiful game unfold. And I think it's outstanding. And it's, as I said, part of the fuel that kind of keeps me going with this weird niche.
I think that's terribly sweet. And I think it must be a very special feeling to be sitting in a seat where somebody sat before watching Babe Ruth. I mean, that just feels like
Yeah.
a continuum that is something very unique. But when we talk about these old ballparks, I, not being a huge baseball fan, not hating baseball, but not being an aficionado, I do think that baseball has some amazing rivalries that must have developed over
Mm.
time. And what do you think are some of the best rivalries in baseball or between ballparks?
Ooh, so baseball, you don't have to be a baseball fan to like ballparks. That's something I always say. I also always tell people to go to baseball games because they're social. Like, you don't need to watch the whole game. Go soak up the sun, have a beer. Cheers. Try three different types of hot dogs or different, good food. And oh, by the way, you can actually have a conversation with the person next to you. I've been to so many basketball or American football games, which is loud and I love it, but the action is so constant, or it's so loud all the time that sometimes it's kind of hard to hear. Go to a baseball game, relax, catch a few of the innings. You might find yourself falling in love with the sport. You also might find yourself falling in love with the stadium. Rivalries. That's a good question. I think most baseball rivalries are between the teams. That's fair to say, and I don't really see ballparks playing too big of a role, except for one baseball rivalry, and that is probably the most famous of them all, which is the Red Sox and the Yankees. These are two of baseball's oldest teams. They have shared a lot of bad blood. They are located decently close to each other. They've played in the same division forever. But also, for about 90 years, they had two of the vintage Jewel Box parks. Old Yankee Stadium and Fenway Park were two of the classics, and they had two of the classic teams playing there. So the rivalry that developed between the Yankees, which really kind of came to a head in the early to mid 2000s, you can go and watch some documentaries on like 2003, 2004, phenomenal baseball seasons and rivalry games between those teams. But some of that was rooted in their stadiums. These two fan bases were so at odds with each other, and it bled onto the field as well, because they both had such a cultural connection to their team, because they had a cultural connection to their almost 100-year-old ballpark at the time. And so I truly do think maybe we'll see it again, but I think of the rivalries in baseball, that's the biggest one that actually had the ballpark play a little bit of a role in it.
See, I thought everybody had a rivalry with the Yankees because as a Mariners fan, I haven't forgiven Alex Rodriguez for leaving. Okay. It's been, I
Yeah,
don't
that's fair.
really,
See, you're a baseball fan. If you're still irked about A-Rod, you like baseball more than you.
well, I
You're
lived
good.
in Seattle in 95. So
So good.
we can talk more about that at the end. But okay, so these Glory Day parks, I think, what you're saying is what people see as vintage baseball stadiums, Wrigley, Fenway. Do you think there are other parks or styles that should be seen as vintage as well?
Oh, vintage often means cool. Like I think if we go to like a vintage, I don't know, record store, like a throwback apparel shop, we see vintage and we're like, oh, that's cool. That's retro. That's awesome. Um, yes and no. I think there are some ballparks that should be seen as cool because they're pretty, like those vintage Glory Day jewel box parks. But as a ballpark lover, ballpark aficionado, ballpark historian, whatever, I got to come up with the right title here. I also come to recognize that there are some ballparks that might not be vintagely cool or pretty that still are really important to the growth and evolution of baseball stadiums. You mentioned, maybe some aren't that pretty. Oh boy, the ballpark was not always beautiful. In the middle part of the 19th century, or sorry, in the 20th century, two new fads started eking their way into the ballpark's evolution. These two things were cars and American football. As car ownership became more and more common, the possibility of building ballparks outside of city centers, outside of these very urban blocks with restricted weird dimensions, etc., became more possible. And also because land was cheaper in the suburbs, the idea of building a ballpark out there became more attractive to owners. So to the suburbs we went. But the design of the ballpark changed as well. With more space, the Jewel Box Park was left behind in favor of a bigger, more efficient style, which we call the multi-purpose venue. This came about because, as I already mentioned, toggle here. Maybe not. There we go. This came about because, as already mentioned, American football was growing in popularity in this time as well. So sports teams, cities figured, why don't we build one stadium that hosts both? Let's just do the utilitarian thing. It's better money, and we can kind of kill two birds with one stone. This that you see on your screen right now is Jack Murphy Stadium in San Diego. Surrounded by a sea of concrete, football on the left, baseball on the right. It's the same aerial shot. This is what a lot of multi-purpose venues looked like. The results of this kind of desire to appeal to the car, to appeal to American football, resulted in a series of quickly assembled, not centrally located, I will say ugly stadiums that were not about character or charm. They were about function and function alone. They were surrounded by parking lots so that you could park your car and then walk inside them and then drive home. And since NFL fields were hosted within, there really wasn't much room for baseball fields to get funky and cool with their dimensions. So that translated into the stadium that surrounded the field. You didn't have big walls. You didn't have deep center fields. You often had, as you can kind of see in this photo here, this is Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh, by the way. You had kind of just the same baseball field with an arced outfield and very little unique characteristics. And this slowly grew to earn these stadiums, many of which look the same, lowly nicknames like toilet bowls or my favorite, drab concrete donuts. The only the only team that still calls a multi-purpose venue home is the Tampa Bay Rays, although Tropicana Field is currently under repair. The Oakland Athletics are famously moving out of Oakland because they played in a multi-purpose venue that was no longer sustainable. These stadiums were, as I said, quickly assembled. They weren't really built to last, unlike their predecessors, the Jewel Box stadiums. But as I also mentioned, as a lover of ballpark history, they are still important. Of these, the Astrodome, which you're seeing right now, was easily the most important for three reasons. First, it was the first domed stadium in American sports. Second, it was the first that introduced the video scoreboard. And third, it was the first to play sports on an artificial playing surface, AstroTurf, hence the name. Each of these elements would go on to impact the ballparks that we go to today, whether they be dome stadiums, retractable roofs. You have tons of video scoreboards everywhere. And about a quarter of the stadiums play on artificial surface. You bet that I dive into the Astrodome in my upcoming book, and I actually have multiple chapters dedicated to what I think is one of the most important baseball stadiums in the history of the ballpark. Many really like to scoff at these objectively ugly ballparks, but also many histories have ugly stages. As a Seattle Mariners fan, we still have nostalgic love for the Kingdome. It was not a nice place to go, but we have good memories there. And I think that's part of the love that still kind of transcends to some of these older venues, even if they weren't as pretty as Wrigley and Fenway. So as a ballpark lover, I think this is just another fascinating chapter of the evolution of baseball stadiums. As a baseball lover and a fan, though, I am glad that we moved on to a new phase, which is called the retro park phase, retro classic to be specific. In the early 1990s, two baseball stadiums were built, and this really created a fork in the road for the ballpark. The first was in Southside Chicago. The White Sox needed a new stadium, so they built a venue that looked a lot like their old one, Comiskey Park, and they called it Comiskey Park 2, New Comiskey Park. And they really leaned kind of into the multi-purpose stadium look, even though this was a baseball-only venue. Located on the outside of town, it's surrounded by parking lots, smothered in concrete. It's not the most attractive stadium, full stop. But the other ballpark that was built was Baltimore's Camden Yards the following year. Baltimore decided to move away from the multi-purpose venue. They built a new ballpark that was just to host baseball, and most importantly, they really leaned into the city from an urban planning standpoint. They used materials that mirrored the vintage kind of golden age jewel box parks and incorporated the B&O warehouse, which you can see in the right part of this picture, kind of that golden building off on the right, into the actual ballpark, along with little streets in Baltimore, like Utah Street, that goes through the right field gate. These two parks, Camden Yards and New Comiskey Park, were built within a year of each other, and one was received far greater than the others, and that was Camden. For the next two decades, every ballpark that was built used Camden Yards as inspiration for their design. Think Coors Field, T-Mobile Park, once Safeco Field in Seattle, Petco Park in San Diego, Citizens Bank Park in Philadelphia. They were each built to look like Camden, which was built to look like the old jewel box parks, giving them the nickname of retro classic. By the time 2010 rolled around, 2/3 of modern baseball stadiums were built in this style. So that's 2/3 of all ballparks. 20 out of 30 ballparks are of the retro classic style. If you go to one of these, you kind of know it. They're welcoming, they're cozy, they lean on things like wonky dimensions. In San Francisco, they have Triples Alley in deep right center. They put pieces of the city into the ballpark, like the Western Metal Supply Co. building in San Diego. And a big thing is that leaning on urbanity. And I think this kind of slide really sums a lot of it up. On the left is Comiskey Park 2, New Comiskey Park, now called Rate Field, just Rate Field, in Southside Chicago. And on the right is Nationals Park. One really wanted to be part of the city, part of the walkability of the city, part of being able to bike there or get there via public transit, and the other is totally reliant on the car. This kind of really pioneered this new era of ballpark design that I don't know if we will ever go away from, but who knows? Because we're about to go somewhere else. This is the Las Vegas skyline. It's where the next Major League Baseball stadium is going to be built. What's it going to look like? Well, we're not sure yet, because not every park is still actually in with the retro classic style. Because, of course, somebody had to be an innovator. And the stadium that launched us into the what's next, future, postmodern, whatever you want to call it, era is one of my favorite stadiums, although many kind of look past it. And it's Miami's loanDepot Park. Like a lot of things, Miami, this place is super unique. It has lime green all over it. It used to have a huge fish statue that you can see in center field there, which is now just outside the ballpark. It had aquariums, you name it. From the outside, it looks like a spaceship. It's covered in this white membrane that helps repel heat, but it really looks like this kind of modernist starship structure. And that's the point. Miami presented the ballpark with a totally clean slate. It is not retro classic. It's not retro anything. It's its own thing. And I think whatever is about to be built in Las Vegas is probably going to follow that lead. The key part here is the ballpark is always evolving. We don't know what it's going to look like next, and that's why I'm so fascinated in this type of thing. Yes, baseball has settled into some things that it likely won't change, things like dugouts and box seats and bullpens. But I'm also fascinated to see how it continues to adapt to things like changes in gameplay, new rules, and new materials and technology that become available. It seems ridiculous now, but who's to say that 100 years from now, we aren't watching baseball in a stadium that's made entirely of some sort of secure, sustainable glass? I know that sounds crazy, but think about it this way. When Alexander Cartwright was playing at the Elysian Fields, the idea that something like the Astrodome could be constructed was also nuts. And yet it happened not just within 150 years, but almost within a century. So whatever happens, the love for baseball and baseball stadiums is not going to disappear. In fact, I think as it continues to change, it's only going to grow. Ballparks are a part of baseball teams' DNA, and therefore they're part of the baseball fans' DNA. And it's in this love that it encourages so many people to try to see many of them or want to see them all. As a young, crazy teenager like I once was, actually went and did. And so I'm going to wrap this up by kind of saying if you are interested in going and seeing all these baseball stadiums, you can. It is not an impossible trip, but I do have a few tips for you as you maybe plan and execute your journey. The first is find somebody, at least one person, maybe multiple people to go with. Sharing this journey with my best friends, Kendall, Ruben, Kellen, and Jack, is still something that I believe has kept us very, very close, despite the fact that we all live in different cities now. Um, Second, take your time. I showed you this map at the beginning of our presentation because it's nonsensical. Our route was insane. We tried to cram everything in. We drove overnight. We doubled back in some spots. We wanted to do it in one summer. That was the goal. That was the whole, bucket list thing. And we proved that you can. You absolutely can do this if you're a bit crazy and that's what you want. And power to you if that is what it is. But also, I think one of the biggest drawbacks from our trip was we really didn't savor as much as each park as much as we could have. So my advice is don't rush it. Try not to pack the calendar completely. Instead, divide your parks by region, maybe West Coast, Midwest, South, Northeast. You don't have to do this all in one summer. And as I mentioned, I probably would recommend not. String it out instead with your friend or friends or family members and enjoy hitting new ballparks, maybe 6 to 10 per year. They're going to keep building new ones, so you're always going to have a new one to go to. You'll be able to enjoy your time more and feel like you aren't as rushed. And then at each stadium you do go to, get there early. You're going to want to soak up pregame festivities, maybe go to a local bar or two to pregame with like some of the local fans, learn some traditions, and also just explore and see everything while there's still daylight. I think this was something that we would sometimes show up right at first pitch, and it's like, oh yeah, the sun does go down at some point, and you, for photos or just being able to see everything, you do kind of want to be able to be there during daylight. So get there a little early to be able to give yourself some time to explore. And then finally, keep on learning. My podcast and book and my upcoming book are going to be great resources, but truly there are so many good ballpark and baseball books out there. And in all honesty, there are so many good baseball fans out there, just like me, and just like maybe you soon, Lisa. Who knows? Maybe you'll get very, very into baseball, who just love to talk ballparks and who love to talk stadiums and who love to talk about this idea of seeing them all. So there you have it. Those are my tips, my love for ballparks, and now you've gotten your 101 on the evolution of ballpark history.
Oh, thank you, Travis. I really, really enjoyed that. And
Thanks.
yes, I lived in Seattle in 1995. So, of course, I have some wonderful memories from baseball and I have some opinions about baseball. But before we get to the word from our sponsor, before we get to the Q&A, I would like to remind people to stick around for our poll about content for next week's show, the Academy Awards. We really do need your help for that. And for the word from our sponsor tonight, if Travis's journey around the US has you craving more travel memories, you can check out Another Young Man's Journey. This is Rick's memoir on the hippie trail. I'm talking about his trip with Gene that he made in a bus that probably smelled somewhat close to the van and the Ballpark Boys. Oh, I can't believe I said that.
You're probably right. No comment on my side. Yes, yes. Probably some folks that needed a shower traveling around in a hippie bus as well. I'm flattered to be mentioned in the same sentence as that, but similar vibes.
Okay, well, we're going to do the Q&A and then we'll do the poll. So for the Q&A, a question that I think probably is on a lot of people's minds, and it's an important one. Steve asks, which ballpark has the best food?
This is one that I get every time that I talk about ballparks. Food, by the way, it's got its own chapter that I'm writing about. Actually, it has two. One is the evolution of the hot dog, and then the evolution of new foods at sports stadiums. Food has become a dominant part of the baseball experience. Really, it started in the baseball stadiums because there's more time to enjoy food. There's more leisurely concourses. You can watch the game while standing at, a beer garden or like a Thai restaurant and still be able to see everything. The baseball stadiums are kind of to thank for this bringing in of not just Cracker Jack, peanut, and hot dogs to the game. But everybody who goes kind of wants to try foods and what they're it's part of new ballpark culture. They pride themselves in weird foods. In Seattle, we serve the Seattle hot dog, which has cream cheese on it. In Texas, they serve the boomstick, which is a 2 foot hot dog that has chili all over it. Milwaukee has special sauce. Every single baseball stadium has their own staple food. But for me, my favorite food is at Oracle Park in San Francisco. This has always been a ballpark that formerly called AT&T Park. It's actually gone through a bunch of name changes. This is a baseball stadium that prides itself in food. It has a lot of Asian influence in its various cuisines. It, of course, has some standard ballpark fare. You'll get your hot dogs, but you'll also get hot dogs with pineapples on them. You'll find a Hawaiian hot dog, that's called. And then my favorite thing there are the chowder bread bowls, which kind of leans into San Francisco culture, but they serve these warm, it gets really cold at San Francisco's ballpark. And they serve these warm chowder bread bowls that you just take. They don't even put them in a container. You just take them in your hand and then you can dunk your spoon into it and put the little bread cap on it as you keep going. And that's one of my favorite sustenance to watch a game. You can't go wrong in most stadiums these days with the food, but if you're really like, what is the best one? My opinion is San Francisco.
Okay. Well, you're wrong, but
Seattle has great food too. Seattle has great food too.
okay. Phyllis asks, any remarks on the Field of Dreams in Iowa? And I didn't even really know I don't really know what I'm asking about, but I think that you probably do. So I thought, let's talk
Dude.
about it.
Oh, Phyllis, there are a few regrets that I have in my life when it comes to baseball. And one is I have never been to the Field of Dreams. Field of Dreams, Lisa, is a cornfield in Iowa where a farmer once upon a time bulldozed the majority of their crop to create a baseball stadium, or actually just more of a baseball field, like a very well maintained, good trimmed, proper baseball field with just a handful of seats to come and invite people to come and play. It got popularized because a man named W.P. Kinsella wrote a book called Shoeless Joe, which talked about this. And then it became even more popular when Kevin Costner made a film called Field of Dreams, which is one of my favorite films. And it is one of the few films that can make me cry every single time I watch it. I have never been to the Field of Dreams. It is on my bucket list to go. One of the things in terms of comments about it that I love is that baseball is starting to tap into these kind of classic places that are associated with America or with kind of baseball history. They played a major league game at the Field of Dreams a few years ago. They actually played two. They played one also at Wrigley Field, the oldest ballpark that's still in use in the United States. They're playing one on a race car track this year. So it's just kind of one of those things that I love that baseball's starting to figure this out. I hope they keep doing this. I hope they keep finding new venues to play in. Build a temporary field next to the Grand Canyon for crying out loud. Like people will tune in and watch that stuff. But it helps promote these books and movies that have become synonymous, not just with baseball, but with a love for baseball, like the movie Field of Dreams. It's a destination that I haven't gotten to yet, but one that I plan to get to at some point, hopefully soon.
Okay. Uh, we love budget travel here at Rick Steves Europe. What's the best ballpark to visit on a budget? Or do parks have budget-friendly nights that we can look out for? For instance, Emily, our own Emily, said that she heard that Cleveland once had a dime beer night, and she seemed very excited about it.
Why wouldn't you be excited about Dime Beer Night? Yes, to both of your questions, there is a good budget ballpark. And also, though, pretty much every ballpark has budget nights. In Seattle, we call them value games. Here in DC, they're called like easy access games. But what it is they either have ticket deals or like family packs, or they have some sort of promotion that's going on where you get, discount beer, discounted hot dogs, or maybe you get a voucher with your ticket. But almost every stadium will have some sort of like the hour before the game where beers or wine are $5, which is not the normal price for a beer these days at the ballpark. Hot dogs are pretty cheap. or they will have a like a specific promotion for the night. And one of my favorite promotions is in Philadelphia. It's called Dollar Dog Night. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Every hot dog is $1, but they limit the amount of hot dogs that you can buy at once. I think you can only buy like two. So people just get in line and eat hot dogs and keep going in line because you can watch the game from the hot dog line. And by the end of the game, they've got 30 hot dogs in their hand. They've only spent $30. And of course, they're not going to eat all 30 hot dogs. So what do you think happens? It becomes a food fight. They start throwing hot dogs on the field. They throw them at the opposing fans. It's honestly fun, and I think it's rooted in good fun. But like, it's the stadium has to know what they're doing there, but they also, they sell it out. Dime beer night was once a thing. Yes, it is not a thing anymore, and you could probably guess why. But you will still find severely discounted drinks if you go onto your local ballpark's website, or it's normally the team's website, and then they have a tab for the ballpark. They'll have upcoming promotions. But when it comes to a specific ballpark that's a good discount ballpark, in my opinion, it's Milwaukee's American Family Field, formerly Miller Park, which is still what it's called in my heart. This is a family friendly place. Everybody that goes there wants to tailgate, and they keep Miller Lights at like $10 a pop, and it is. And then that's pretty cheap, by the way. That's pretty cheap for
Oh,
baseball stadiums. I know, I know. You can still get them for even cheaper at the beginning of the game, but as it goes on, it will remain that way. The tickets are always very reasonable, and in my opinion, I slipped up. American Family Field's the best budget ballpark.
I'm going to insert my own question in here just because I'm thinking about what you're saying. Would Ohio be the best baseball state? Could you like what
Mm.
state has the most parks near?
The cheap answer there is California. California has five or six. I'm trying to remember the A's. Yeah, the A's are still in California. They're about not to be. So California has six Major League Baseball teams. So they have five Major League Baseball teams. Sorry, the A's, the Giants, the Angels, the Dodgers, and the Padres. So that's at least the state that has the most, teams that you can go and see. But in terms of kind of like baseball fandom, this is tough. Pennsylvania is a good one. They have two teams, the Pirates and the Phillies. They also have Williamsport, which is where the Little League World Series is played.
Hmm?
And then also, I would have to put New York on there because they also have the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. And Cooperstown is supposedly where Admiral Doubleday drew up the game of baseball, although that, as we already discussed, is more of a myth than anything else. But it's a phenomenal destination, as is Yankee Stadium and Citi Field, where the Mets play, whether or not you like New York's baseball teams.
No, I do not. I think we've established that.
Fair.
Okay. Okay. A very hometown question because our viewer Allison is going to be in Seattle in August and she wants to know what things should she not miss at T-Mobile Park, which I still
Oh,
call Safeco, so I'm a little out of the loop.
Allison, I hope you enjoy your time to Seattle, and I hope you enjoy your time to T-Mobile Park. Despite however the Mariners are doing, the Mariners are still my favorite team, and as a diehard Mariner fan, you die a lot, as I always say. But in your visit to the ballpark, yeah, there are actually two things that I always talk about for my friends who are going. One is the art in the park. T-Mobile Park, I think, kind of flies under the radar. It has really good art, and I know that's not what you're going to the baseball game to see, but it is something that sets this stadium apart from others. If you can enter, well, if you can walk by the left field entrance, where there's this huge bronze glove baseball mitt which with a big hole in it. That's a big commission piece of art that they put up there in 1999 when this baseball stadium was opened. But then don't enter through that gate. Walk around the rest of the stadium and enter through the home plate gate. And when you do, you'll walk in under this chandelier that's called the Tempest. It's this huge, huge thing, stories tall, made of 1,000 crystal bats, like baseball bats, that also reflect the sunlight when the sun goes down. And so it's supposed to be in the shape of a tempest. It's all built over a compass to kind of give this idea of the storm through which mariners must navigate, which is a little cheesy, but also I like it. And if you're entering for a night game, I don't know when you're going to be going, they normally keep all the slats pretty wide open in the home plate entrance, and you'll get just great sunlight still beaming through and illuminating this chandelier. So anyway, the art in the park is one thing. There's also a bunch of different pieces throughout the stadium, but I won't I won't continue too much here. You'll have to discover them yourself. And then the other thing is the views. This stadium is built right on the edge of the water. So go up to the third deck, walk around to the left field side, and make sure you at least spend an inning and have yourself a drink up there to be able to just sit and watch the ferries roll in, watch the sunset over the Olympic Mountains, and kind of beam up against the city of Seattle. It's an absolutely fantastic view that is maybe unrivaled among any ballparks. Hopefully, the game is good too.
Yeah, we can't guarantee that. Well,
No,
there'll be good
no, we
food
can't.
and good views, but we cannot guarantee how
Food
the
is
game.
good. Yeah, yeah.
Let's see. I think that we have time for two more questions, and one of them I think is something that's on our viewer Martin's mind, but I think a lot of people. What about minor league baseball?
Mm,
Minor league baseball parks, but also, there's the Savannah Bananas and the Party Animals.
yeah.
How does that have a place in current baseball?
So as kind of as mentioned, my focus is Major League Baseball stadium. So I don't know too much about the intricacies of minor league parks or what their fun characteristics, et cetera, are, but I do know a few things, and I will talk a little bit about the Savannah Bananas as well. Minor league parks are far more intimate. They're far kind of more homey feeling. You're closer to the action. There's fewer people there. They have unreal promotions throughout the game, like ways to keep people entertained, but also I think to maybe keep the staff entertained. Like this isn't professional ball. Their best players aren't going to be there long because they're probably going to move up. So they have the most ridiculous in-game promotions. The Tacoma Rainiers have the saxophone gorilla, which is a promotion where gorilla comes out and plays saxophone. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a riot.
Seriously?
Yep, go and look it up on any form of social media. Just type in Sax Gorilla Tacoma, and you'll get your hits. And so I like to, when I've gone to minor league games, I like to try and tap into what weird thing they are doing to entertain and attract fans. And actually, there are some that really, really pack the park every single time, it seems. So the love for minor leagues has kind of gone up and down with the evolution of baseball. But I think enough people like the sport enough just to be able to still show up to the game regardless of what promotion is taking place. But for those who don't really find themselves as big baseball fans, the Savannah Bananas and affiliates are, in my opinion, outstanding. I think there's a lot of traditional baseball people that are like, what are they doing? They're dancing or they're hitting on stilts or they're having pillow fights in the outfield. I don't care. The Savannah Bananas sell out 70,000 seat fields for baseball games, and they are attracting an audience that probably isn't interested in baseball otherwise. So it's kind of like, well, who cares if people are tuning into baseball because people are using a wiffle bat to try and hit, a ball, or they're doing dancing to a Broadway show before making a pitch. Like, I think that's awesome. And I think it's something that will only help the game grow more. And there's actually been one or two players. There was one guy on the Mariners even who was a Savannah Banana and then was good enough where he actually wound up in the minor leagues and then actually had a few at bats for the Mariners. So at some point, maybe somebody will like make a musical about that. I don't know. We'll see. But I think the Savannah Bananas and minor league baseball both do their own slightly separate thing in promoting love for the game.
Okay. So, the last question I will ask is from Aria, and she says, do you have a favorite baseball or ballpark memory that you'd like to share with us tonight?
Ooh, oh boy. Um, I mean that's open-ended and tough. Yes, favorite in a weird way. Okay. I'm going to take you back to I was a 6-year-old boy. I had fallen in love with the Mariners at the age of 3 because I was 3 years old in 1995, Lisa, which for those of you tuning in and you've heard that year referenced suddenly, that's the year that saved baseball in Seattle.
I
Go
still
and
love
just
you.
go. It is go and Google it. They've made multiple documentaries. It's actually a phenomenal season and like just fun, even if you're not a Mariners fan. Whole bunch of like political votes and are we gonna keep the Mariners? And then they out of nowhere created a season saving run to the playoffs. It's good stuff that still makes me choke up. And that's the spark of my baseball fandom. A few years later, I am a T-ball loving little kid in a backwards hat who loved Ken Griffey Jr. And my mom took me to a baseball game at the Kingdom. So it was. It was early in the year, and we were seated way up in the right field stands. And Ken Griffey Jr., I had my little glove, tiny little glove. Ken Griffey Jr. hit his first home run of the season, and it came right to me. And
No.
I, as a 6-year-old boy, reached out for it and didn't catch it. Ball bounced. Of course, I didn't catch it. I was 6 years old. That thing's coming in 100-something miles an hour, it feels like. I missed it, and that stuck with me for the rest of my life because I've never caught or been given a baseball at a baseball game. I have gone to thousands, I think, of baseball games, and I've never once. The closest I got was in spring training. I fielded a ground ball or a foul ball that Edgar Martinez hit, which was cool, but it was in batting practice, and like the field marshal kind of gave it to me. At a game, I've never once caught a foul ball or a home run or even been like tossed one. And I'm now the age where if I do catch one, I probably should give it to like a little kid sitting nearby. But I also kind of want to keep one. So if I ever get it, yeah, you asked what my favorite baseball memory is. I don't know if it's favorite, but it's definitely the most impactful one because it stayed with me of this little boy who loved baseball who didn't catch the baseball. And probably somewhere in my mind, I was like, I'll get more opportunities. And I've never once gotten another opportunity. And it stuck with me because it's kind of fostered my love and my idea of, well, what am I going to do if hopefully I do one day catch one? I'm just going to have to keep going to more baseball games and see.
So you mentioned the art that's outside of T-Mobile Park, and it's the giant glove with the hole in the middle. Does that
Oh,
stick
you better.
because of your 6-year-old memory?
My mom claims that she pulled me away from the ball because she was scared, which I don't blame her. That's good parenting, in my opinion. I think I muffed it. I don't know. I remember the ball coming in. We were really high up. Ken Griffey Jr. hit some mammoth home runs, and somehow they reached where we were. And to this day, still no ball for Trav.
Okay, well, fingers crossed you'll have more chances. Travis, I want to thank you again. And I hope that you come back and talk to us when the next book is published, or we can talk about your time at the EU. I really had a nice time. I mean, we've been friends for a long time, so of course it's lovely to have you here with us on Monday Night Travel. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you to everybody who tuned in.